Bree Smith on behalf of Solidarity PBP.
Minister, I don't know if you're aware, but the European Commissioner for Transport is due in Ireland today or tomorrow, or probably both, to meet with the Irish Aviation Authority. And coincidentally, the Transport Committee meeting was cancelled this week, and we were due to hear witnesses from IALPA, the Airline Pilots Association. For the second time, it has been cancelled. And whatever the reasons, and there's different arguments about what the reasons for it are, there is some very important evidence to be given by the Ryanair pilots to that committee. And that is why the Commissioner is here from Europe today to talk to the Irish Aviation Authority. Now, I want to say to the media, I know they're worried about covering this because a lot of revenue for the media comes from advertising through Ryanair, but I think this is a very serious issue of public interest. And I do think that we are compromised on the question of aviation safety in this country because of the relationship between the Irish Aviation Authority and the airlines that it is supposed to regulate. So I want to ask you, Minister, given that there were recently 700,000 passengers disrupted due to the cancellation of Ryanair flights and the sort of light that was thrown on the activities of the airline in relation to pilots, in relation to health and safety, in relation to irregularity of working hours and conditions of pilots, do you think that it is important that the pilots address the Transport Committee and that the outcome of whatever the discussions the Commissioner has today with the Irish Aviation Authority are made public to this House? Because, Minister, I have very serious concerns about public interest here. And I want to just say to you, this is very genuine. It's not about trying to stir it up, but it is about listening carefully to what the pilots have to say and what they are saying about the regulatory authorities. The chief one is this: that the Irish Aviation Authority, unlike all other authorities looking after aviation across Europe, is set up on a commercial for-profit basis. And it collects charges and other revenue from the airlines, the very airlines it regulates. And in the case of Ryanair, it collects most of its revenue from Ryanair. And just to give you an example of the level of monies that are involved here, last year the Irish Aviation Authority made a profit of almost 40 million, just below 40 million, and the CEO, Eamon Brennan, receives a salary of €344,000 a year. Now, this regulates the safety of the airlines with which it is making the money from, so that there is a toxic relationship here between that regulatory authority which looks after our air safety and the means in which it collects its revenue. As I say, it's illegal in many European countries, and there are huge implications for the working conditions of the pilots that I'll go into when we come back. But the two questions to you: are you aware of this relationship? Do you think, Minister, that it compromises the safety of civil aviation in this country? And, Minister, do you think it is acceptable that the IAA is set up on a basis of profit-making that allows them to have this sort of dysfunctional relationship at best with its airlines?
First of all, I understand that the Commissioner is addressing a Transport Committee, and I do not have any control over the agenda set by the Transport Committee. That is set by the committee itself. No doubt there are a lot of issues of concern, not least the concerns in relation to what would happen in the event of Brexit and the impact that might have, and of course on the safety of passengers. It is my understanding that the reason why there was disruption to Ryanair flights was the very reason that the safety of passengers was going to be the priority, and it wasn't the commercial interests of the company which was being served by the decisions that were taken there, and the company itself had to come out and put its hands up and admit to its own failings, and I think that is regulation working. The question that the Deputy raises as to whether regulators in general should be funded by levies on the industry which they regulate, I think that is common practice for most of our regulators, and I think the reason for it is regulation is important, but the general taxpayer shouldn't be asked to pay, when the industry itself should pay by way of registration fees and oversight for the exercise that a regulator provides. It's really important to the reputation of that industry, and it in no way, and that's very clearly set out in the legislation, the source of their payments in no way compromise their primary commitment to safety. They are accountable to this House and to others in relation to how they execute their mandate and can at any stage be called to account. But the use of levies, whether it be in banking or in other regulated entities paying for the cost of regulation, is quite a common practice across all jurisdictions, and we have used it in most of our regulator activities, and it has never been shown to compromise in any way the exercise of the statutory obligations of these authorities.
Deputy Smith, there's 1 minute.
I do have to dispute that this is common practice, because Ireland is the only aviation authority in Europe that uses this model, and it is possible to separate the authorities that collect revenue from the airlines through the taxation system, for example, and the authority that regulates how the airlines operate. And you see, this goes to a bigger issue. When you say that the safety of passengers was at the heart of the cancellations, that is not the case. Pilots are exiting Ryanair in their hundreds because there's a shortage of them globally, and because the structures that Ryanair uses to establish the employment of pilots is illegal elsewhere in Europe. It is highly irregular, and it has been investigated by 2 revenue groups in Britain and in Germany. The governments in Britain and Germany are investigating pilots who live there for tax fraud. Now imagine the stress that that puts on the pilots. There's a complex reason why that happens, because the pilots are forced to be self-employed, and their work is then traded between various different companies. Those companies are being investigated, the pilots are being investigated, and the pilots are also being pressurised to cut down on their usage of fuel through the use of tables, which the Minister for Transport has, and which was denied that he ever discussed it with the Irish Aviation Authority. There is a bag of worms here. It is a dirty game. Somebody is keeping quiet about a lot of injustices, and there's a lot of money being made. And what you say is not true. This is highly irregular.
Minister Bruton.
I think if the Deputy at any stage wants to bring forward to the Minister of Transport or raise questions in relation to legal changes, it's open to her. But we do have robust labour law available in this country to protect workers. We do have very robust aviation authorities to protect the safety of passengers. I have seen no evidence of failing on part of those authorities. And if there are failings that the Deputy wants to bring to the attention, the Deputy and her party can cross-examine these authorities in committee, where they will be open and account for their fulfilment of their statutory mandate. And that's the accountability that is part of what we do. Part of our business here is to hold these authorities to account. Not I. You have the same right and opportunity as everyone else to call in these authorities and hold them to account and put the points and let them answer for them. And I think I think it is a robust system of accountability which you should use.
We'll move on to